Before we begin, take a breath. This isn't just a podcast, it's a new way to think, speak, and live in English. Welcome to Confluent Podcast, where words flow, confidence grows, and every sip brings you closer to fluency. So, what if I told you that every single English test you've ever taken is actually the reason you freeze up when talking to a native speaker?
I mean, it is a fundamentally counterintuitive premise, right? We're basically conditioned from childhood to believe that measurement equals competence. Like if you pass the test, you have the skill.
Exactly. Usually when we talk about measuring a skill or getting a diagnosis on our progress, there's this expectation of engineering level precision.
Right, like an X-ray.
Yeah. If you break your arm, the X-ray shows this jagged white line. The doctor points to it and says, there's the fracture. It's clean, it's binary, and it gives you a precise timeline.
Well, humans just gravitate toward that kind of visible data. I mean, it gives us an illusion of control. We want to see our progress neatly mapped out on a chart.
But step into the world of language learning, especially when you hit that dreaded intermediate plateau, and that X-ray machine just completely shatters.
Oh, absolutely. The landscape of your progress becomes completely murky at that point.
Right. You can study for 3 hours a day, memorize 1,000 vocabulary flashcards, ace your written exams, and yet the moment a native speaker asks you an off-script question at a coffee shop, your brain just flatlines.
You stutter, you translate in your head, it's a mess.
Exactly. The traditional diagnostic tools we rely on, they just don't reflect real-world conversational ability.
We're basically operating in diagnostic muddy waters here. I mean, the metrics we use to judge fluency, like conjugated verb quizzes, are often the exact cognitive roadblocks preventing us from achieving it.
Because they train the brain to treat language as a math problem, right?
Exactly. A math problem to be solved, rather than a reflex to be experienced.
So today in this deep dive, I want to break down exactly how we dismantle that math problem. We are dissecting the mechanics of the Confluent methodology.
Which is fascinating, because millions globally use this system to completely bypass the classroom.
Yeah, and achieve real natural conversational fluency. We're looking specifically at a massive 3-month language challenge introduced in a recent live broadcast by the creator of the system.
Right. And we're going to unpack the underlying psychology of why adult learners fail and how to manipulate our neurology to absorb language like a natural-born speaker.
Exactly. So whether you are stuck trying to elevate your English or you're applying these hacks to a totally different skill, this framework fundamentally flips how you measure progress.
The foundational shift here is the tension between measuring outcomes and measuring inputs. It addresses exactly why that X-ray metaphor breaks down.
Right. We're moving away from outcome-based anxiety.
And shifting toward input-based inevitability.
Okay, let's start with how this system views the traditional classroom. Honestly, the methodology violently rejects it.
Oh, completely discards it. The sterile environment, the rote memorization, all of it is out.
Yeah, out in favor of immersive, native-like exposure. To understand what that actually looks like, let's look at their movie club lessons.
That's a great example.
So recently, an entire lesson was built around the famous red pill, blue pill scene from the 1999 sci-fi movie, The Matrix.
Right, taking that specific scene with Morpheus and Neo to teach highly relevant modern slang.
Which is a brilliant use of cognitive anchoring, but I can hear the critics now, Why use a late 90s movie to teach practical English today?
Well, if we analyze the sociological evolution of internet culture, the concepts of the red pill and the blue pill have entirely escaped the boundaries of that film.
Oh, for sure. You hear it everywhere now.
Exactly. They are ubiquitous across podcasts, political discourse, philosophical forums. People use it to describe waking up to a harsh reality versus, choosing comfortable ignorance.
Okay, but I'm going to push back on this a little. Using the Matrix is a fun parlor trick for learning internet slang. But if I'm a professional prepping for a high-stakes corporate job interview, knowing pop culture metaphors seems kind of trivial.
You're worried it won't translate to the boardroom.
Yeah. If I drop a red pill metaphor in a quarterly earnings meeting, I might get escorted out of the building by security. How does this methodology survive in a rigid professional environment?
And that is the exact friction point many adult learners experience. They assume that professional English requires a totally different acquisition mechanism than conversational English.
Right, like you need a textbook for business.
But the methodology argues otherwise. The system actually includes a business English module that specifically targets career advancement and corporate idioms.
Oh, really? How do they do that without textbooks?
Well, here's the critical distinction. It doesn't use a textbook of sterile artificial corporate dialogues. The material consists of unscripted, highly authentic conversations between the system's creator and his own father.
His father.
Yeah, his father has an extensive business background.
So instead of reading a script that says, "Hello, Mr. Smith, let us discuss our synergy," you are listening to a father and son actually hash out real business concepts.
Precisely. And they interrupt each other, they use natural pacing, they employ unspoken pragmatic cues.
That's amazing. So the mechanism of acquisition remains identical.
Exactly identical, whether you are learning internet slang from a movie or negotiation tactics from a seasoned businessman. You are absorbing the language as it is authentically deployed in the wild.
And I imagine when you learn a phrase in the context of a passionate debate between two family members, your brain files it differently.
It absolutely does. It bypasses the short-term declarative memory, which is, where textbook facts go to die.
Right.
And it integrates it into long-term associative episodic memory networks.
Because it carries emotional weight. It is not just ink on a page, it is the specific cadence of a father giving his son career advice.
Exactly. Human memory is inherently narrative-driven. We evolved to remember stories and social dynamics, not disconnected lists of data points.
That makes so much sense. When the language is attached to a compelling narrative, the brain deems it vital for survival and social cohesion.
Which drastically lowers the cognitive resistance to remembering it.
Okay, so if the goal is to absorb this authentic material, the system prescribes a radical immersive sprint. This is the core event we need to dissect today.
Right. The massive 3-month maximum intensity challenge.
The logistics are straightforward, but honestly, they sound kind of grueling. The objective is to do as much active listening and reading as humanly possible for roughly 90 days.
And they track it using a free third-party fitness tracking platform called Challenge Runner.
Yeah, every single day, participants log their minutes, not what they comprehended, not the vocabulary they memorized, just the pure, unadulterated minutes they spent engaged.
This is the crux of the paradigm shift. The instructions are incredibly strict. You track time, and you completely ignore improvement.
Which is wild to me. There are no comprehension tests on Friday afternoons.
None. You do not measure your vocabulary expansion. You only measure the input mechanism.
I am really struggling to see how people stay motivated without measuring their improvement, though. I mean, if I am running a marathon, I need to check my mile splits.
To know you're getting faster, right?
Yeah. If I don't see progress, I quit. How does gamifying time instead of skill keep a learner from burning out?
Well, to understand the psychology here, we have to look at the fitness analogy the creator uses to explain this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Consider a person attempting to lose weight. If they step on the scale every single morning to measure their improvement, what inevitably happens?
The scale fluctuates, right, based on water retention or whatever.
Exactly. Water retention, sleep, sodium intake. They might do everything perfectly for a week and see the number go up.
And then they completely lose their minds and eat a whole cake.
Right. The psychological result is a massive spike in cortisol, severe frustration, and a high probability of abandoning the diet entirely.
Because they are obsessing over a lagging indicator. The number on the scale is the delayed result of invisible biological processes from days ago.
And that is the exact mechanism of failure in language learning. Test scores and conversational fluency are lagging indicators.
Wait, so fluency is lagging?
Absolutely. The neurology of language acquisition is not a linear curve. Your brain is silently building complex synaptic connections for weeks before you suddenly realize you understand a new grammatical structure.
So if you test yourself during that invisible building phase, you will fail the test, feel inadequate, and just quit.
Exactly. But if that same person trying to lose weight throws the scale in the garbage and focuses exclusively on their daily inputs.
Like, did I maintain my fasting window? Did I eat my target macronutrients?
Right. Did I complete my 45-minute workout? If they just check those daily boxes, the fat loss becomes mathematically guaranteed. The biology takes care of itself.
Oh, wow. And that is the psychological liberation of the 3-month challenge. You are gamifying the effort, which is entirely within your control.
Rather than the outcome, which is largely subconscious and delayed. If your goal is to log 60 minutes of listening, and you do it, you win the day.
You get that daily dopamine hit of success. You bypass the anxiety of the intermediate plateau because the plateau is just an outcome-based illusion.
You focus on the behavior you can control, and you trust the neuroplasticity of your brain to adapt automatically.
There is a competitive element to this as well, though it's based entirely on the honor system. There is a leaderboard, and the top performers actually get a private webinar with the creator.
Which is a great incentive. But if we are relying purely on logging minutes, we have to define what actually qualifies as a minute.
Right, because frankly, I could leave a British news station playing softly on my computer while I sleep and log 8 hours a night.
Which brings us to the strict rules of engagement, specifically the cognitive dividing line between active and passive immersion.
This distinction is non-negotiable within the methodology, right?
Completely non-negotiable. You cannot simply bathe in the ambient noise of a foreign language and expect your brain to magically decode its syntax.
So reading is straightforward. If your eyes are scanning an English page and you are processing the words, it counts.
All right, that's easy to define.
But for the listening component, the parameters are incredibly tight. Only active listening is permitted on the leaderboard.
So if you have an English podcast playing in the background while your mind wanders, or while you are reading a complicated email in your native language,
those minutes are disqualified, 0 points.
Exactly. We need to unpack the neurological difference here. When you passively hear a language, say a radio playing, while you write a complex report, your brain delegates that auditory input to a very low-level processing state.
It just treats it as acoustic environmental noise, right?
Yes. It is not allocating the necessary cognitive resources, specifically in Wernicke's area, which handles language comprehension, to decode the semantics or the grammar.
It is the equivalent of hearing a guitar playing at a restaurant versus sitting in the front row of a concert, intently watching exactly how the guitarist's fingers are moving across the frets.
That is a highly accurate analogy. Passive listening might mildly stimulate the auditory cortex, sure.
It helps you get vaguely accustomed to the rhythm.
Right, but it is entirely insufficient to force the neural pathways to undergo the stress required for actual adaptation. Active listening demands that your conscious attention is directed at extracting meaning.
But active listening doesn't mean you have to lock yourself in a sensory deprivation tank, sitting perfectly still.
No, not at all. The guidelines specifically permit multitasking, provided it is the right kind of multitasking.
The dividing line is cognitive interference versus physical automation.
Yes. Activities like walking, washing the dishes, driving a familiar route, those are fully approved.
Your body is occupied, but because those tasks are physically automated, your conscious brain can remain locked onto the audio.
The architect of the system actually notes that his preferred method of listening involves pacing back and forth.
Really? Just pacing?
Yeah, because the physical movement keeps his energy levels high and prevents his brain from drifting into a sluggish state.
This aligns perfectly with what cognitive science tells us about kinesthetic learning and cerebral blood flow, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Mild, automated physical activity increases heart rate, delivering more oxygen to the brain, which heightens focus.
And washing dishes requires zero linguistic processing. But the moment you attempt to read an email or hold a conversation in your native language,
You introduce catastrophic cognitive interference. You are demanding that your brain process two completely different linguistic streams simultaneously,
which it can't do. It just kicks the English audio out of the active attention center.
rendering the time completely useless for acquisition.
Okay, so there is a massive structural hack mentioned in the Q&A segment regarding this time tracking, and honestly, it feels almost like a cheat code.
Ah, yes, the double dip strategy.
Yeah. A participant asked if they could listen to an audiobook while simultaneously reading the physical text. The answer was yes, but more importantly, if you do that for 1 hour, you log 2 hours on the leaderboard.
1 hour for reading and 1 hour for listening. You count the exact same block of time twice.
That's amazing. Why is that so encouraged?
Well, the double dip strategy is not just a clever way to manipulate a leaderboard. It is arguably the most potent cognitive tool for rapid language acquisition.
Okay, break that down for me, because listening to native speakers is usually the most demoralizing part of learning. When I listen to two native speakers talking at full speed, I don't hear individual words.
You just hear one long, continuous stream of sound.
Exactly. If someone says water, the textbook tells me it sounds like water, but the native speaker says water.
You're describing the challenge of parsing phones. In natural speech, words blend together. Consonants are dropped.
And the brain of a language learner just struggles to identify where one word ends and the next begins.
Right. But by utilizing the double dip hack, reading the text while hearing the audio, your visual cortex provides real-time, explicit hints to your auditory cortex.
So your eyes are mapping the spelling directly to the native pronunciation.
Exactly. This prevents the brain from hallucinating incorrect sounds and rapidly accelerates your ability to decode spoken language.
And this applies directly to movies as well. If you watch a film with English audio and English subtitles, you get to double dip that time.
Yes, but there is a crucial pacing distinction based on skill level here.
Right, advanced learners are encouraged to watch entire movies straight through, allowing the story to carry them.
But for lower intermediate learners, sitting through a 2-hour movie would just be a drowning experience.
So what's the advice for them?
To go scene by scene, watch 3 minutes, pause, look up the critical vocabulary, then watch it again.
This touches on the concept of comprehensible input, pioneered by linguist Stephen Krashen, right?
Yes. For input to be effective, it must be just slightly above your current level of competence, the zone of proximal development.
So if you flood a lower intermediate learner with 2 hours of rapid-fire cinematic dialogue, it's no longer comprehensible. It just becomes white noise.
And the affective filter, the brain's emotional barrier goes up. Anxiety spikes, and learning ceases completely. Going scene by scene keeps that filter low.
I am going to be entirely honest, though. I am trying to picture myself doing this. Even if I find the perfect movie scene, how does anyone actively listen to a foreign language for hours without their brain turning to absolute mush?
It's exhausting, right?
Yeah. If I try to actively decode a foreign language, I experience intense mental fatigue within 15 minutes. My mind starts drifting to my grocery list.
That mental fatigue is not a sign of failure. It is a physiological reality.
Mm-hmm.
Focus is not a static, inherent talent. It is a biological resource that depletes.
Like muscular endurance.
Exactly.
Really?
You wouldn't walk into a gym on day 1 and attempt to bench press 300 pounds. Attempting to actively decode for 2 uninterrupted hours is a recipe for cognitive failure.
A user raised this exact concern in the Q&A, actually. The proposed solution is the Pomodoro technique.
It's classic and highly effective strategy.
You set a rigid timer for 25 minutes of intense, unbroken focus. The moment that timer goes off, you take a mandatory 5-minute brain rest.
You step away from the material, close your eyes, listen to instrumental music, stare out a window.
Just let the brain cool down. Then, you initiate another 25-minute block.
The neurological rationale for this is profound. During that 5-minute break, your brain enters the default mode network.
So even though you feel like you are doing nothing,
Your brain is furiously working in the background, consolidating the vocabulary you just encountered, moving it from short-term into deeper storage.
and pushing through these blocks gradually builds cognitive endurance. Over 3 months, your capacity for focus naturally extends.
But for those who argue that their lives are simply too chaotic to sit down with a timer, the methodology offers the ultimate pragmatic hack: micro-sessions.
Yes, you do not need a 2-hour block of silence. You do 10 minutes of active listening on a waterproof speaker while in the shower.
Or 15 minutes while walking to the bus stop.
Squeeze in 20 minutes while chopping vegetables. By the time your head hits the pillow, those fragmented micro-sessions have compounded into an hour or 2 of highly focused input.
It entirely dismantles the lack of time excuse. You just audit your day, identify the dead space, and transform those moments into a mobile language laboratory.
I love that. Now, this intense focus on gathering input leads us to a phase of language acquisition that triggers deep psychological resistance in adult learners. We have to talk about the silent period.
This is where we confront the deepest insecurities adults possess when stepping into the role of a novice.
The architect of the system relates this concept to observing his 2 infant children. He points out a glaring biological fact. Babies spend the first 1 to 2 years of their lives in an absolute silent period.
They are relentless observation machines. They listen, absorb phonetic patterns, deduce context, all long before they articulate a single coherent sentence.
They just sit there and take it all in, and crucially, they do so without a shred of performance anxiety.
Right. An infant does not experience crippling shame because they cannot correctly conjugate a past tense verb at 10 months old. Their ego is not tied to their linguistic output.
So the argument is that adult learners must weaponize this silent period. When you are a beginner, the sheer terror of trying to speak perfectly on day 1 is paralyzing.
It spikes your stress hormones immensely.
But by granting yourself a mandatory silent period where your only obligation is to listen and read, you instantly diffuse that anxiety.
And if we look at the neuroarchitecture being built during this period, it is astonishing. You are constructing a massive subconscious database of phonology and grammar.
You are calibrating Wernicke's area to recognize the natural melody of the language.
So when you finally transition to speaking, You are not mentally searching for a grammar rule in a textbook. You are drawing upon a deep, intuitive well of what simply sounds right.
Let's pause there, though, because there is a massive trap hidden in this concept, which was brought up during the Q&A. A participant asked if the silent period can simply become an excuse.
A comfortable hiding place for someone terrified of speaking to a native.
Exactly. And the system's architect completely agreed. Because the input phase is so safe, it is highly addictive. You can sit in your room listening to podcasts for years, feeling productive, but eventually you have to open your mouth.
That is the comfort zone trap. The silent period is a temporary scaffolding, not a permanent residence.
So when do you break it?
When your comprehension reaches a high level, the law of diminishing returns kicks in. To truly lock in the language, you must engage Broca's area, the part of the brain responsible for speech production.
You must willingly embrace the awkwardness of making mistakes. Speaking forces your brain to retrieve vocabulary in real time under pressure,
Which cements the neural pathways in a way that passive recognition simply cannot.
The creator shared a highly personal anecdote illustrating this. He is 51 years old, currently navigating the beginner stages of learning Japanese.
And he freely admits he is relying heavily on Romaji Japanese written out using the English alphabet.
Right, because attempting to learn traditional kanji characters creates too much cognitive load right now. He is protecting his input phase.
But he also shared a story from a few years ago when he was walking the Camino de Santiago.
This is that grueling 500-mile pilgrimage across the north of Spain, right? Takes roughly 40 days to walk.
Exactly. He had been comfortably residing in a Spanish silent period for a long time, just listening to audio, avoiding speaking.
But out there on the trail, exhausted and needing shelter, he was forced to break his silence. He had to call a local hotel to book a room.
He had to push through the intense, visceral discomfort of sounding foolish and struggling to be understood.
And that specific discomfort is the catalyst for true fluency. The biological necessity of the situation needing shelter completely overrode his ego's desire to appear articulate.
It is the perfect illustration of transitioning from the sterilized safety of input to the chaotic, necessary crucible of output.
Now, mentioning his age learning Japanese at 51 brings up another massive psychological barrier for adult learners.
The myth that children are linguistic sponges and adults are just too old.
Yes, the system completely detonates this myth. The architect cites a well-known polyglot, Steve Kaufman, who is a former diplomat. Kaufman is 73 years old, and he is currently learning Turkish, Arabic, and Persian simultaneously.
3 of the most notoriously difficult languages on the planet at 73.
It's incredible.
The children are sponges concept is one of the most scientifically misunderstood myths in education. Yes, children possess a biological advantage regarding phonetic articulation.
They can acquire a native-like accent easier because their vocal apparatus is still forming.
However, when we evaluate the speed of overall language acquisition vocabulary size, complex grammar adults actually possess massive compounding advantages.
Okay, I have to challenge that. How can an adult possibly learn faster than a toddler whose entire brain is designed for rapid growth?
It comes down to schema theory and conceptual frameworks. An adult brain is already fully furnished with the concepts of the world.
Like what?
If you want to teach an adult the English words for mortgage, irony, or inflation, they instantly understand the underlying concept. They simply attach a new phonetic label to a file folder that already exists in their brain.
Whereas with a 5-year-old,
You cannot simply teach a 5-year-old the word mortgage. You first have to explain property ownership, banking, interest rates, and decades of debt.
the cognitive load required to build the concept from scratch is immense.
Exactly. Because adults already possess this vast conceptual framework, they can immediately consume highly sophisticated material like history podcasts or psychological thrillers.
This allows an adult to acquire thousands of complex vocabulary words in a fraction of the time it takes a child, who is restricted to input about colors and immediate physical needs.
That reframing is unbelievably liberating, isn't it?
It completely destroys the narrative of I am too old and must study twice as hard. It replaces it with I possess the intellectual maturity to learn with brutal efficiency.
It restores agency to the learner. You are leveraging your accumulated wisdom.
But if we are leveraging our adult brains, we have to feed them properly. Where do we find the materials to listen to and read?
If you just stick to standard ESL dialogues, your vocabulary will never expand beyond asking for directions.
Which leads us to the final major theme discussed in the Q&A. expanding the linguistic map by aggressively following your own curiosity.
This is the phase where the methodology transforms the language into a transparent vehicle for exploring reality.
The system points out a fascinating statistical reality. The core vocabulary we use to navigate 90% of our daily lives is shockingly small.
If your daily conversations consist only of the weather and office logistics, you will perpetually recycle the same narrow set of words.
To force your vocabulary to grow, you must systematically expose your brain to entirely foreign domains of knowledge. During the live stream, a participant asked about reading Marcus Aurelius.
The ancient Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher.
Yes. The advice given was highly strategic. If the original translations are too dense, do not abandon Stoicism. Instead, retreat to easier, modernized books on the exact same subject.
Build the domain-specific vocabulary first. In educational psychology, this is known as scaffolding.
Instead of repeatedly crashing into a wall of impenetrable text, you consciously build a cognitive ramp. You acquire words like virtue, resilience, and dichotomy in a comprehensible context.
Once those terms are securely locked into passive memory, the cognitive load to tackle the advanced text is drastically reduced.
The Q&A session itself was a masterclass in this kind of diverse exploration. For instance, the topic of travel geography came up. The architect detailed how he was inspired to visit Marrakech, Morocco.
But not from a travel brochure, right?
Nope. He was listening to an English podcast hosted by Robert Plant, the lead singer of Led Zeppelin. Plant was discussing his travels to Morocco in 1975 and the cultural blend that influenced their album, Physical Graffiti.
Hearing that raw passion on a podcast was the catalyst for his own travel plans. Think about what is occurring in the learner's brain there.
They are not studying English grammar.
Exactly. They're absorbing 1970s rock history, Moroccan geography, and Middle Eastern musical scales. The English language has vanished as an object to study. It's just the delivery mechanism.
The cultural exploration didn't stop there. He went on to detail the Shikoku 88 pilgrimage in Japan, a grueling 40-day walk around an island to visit 88 Buddhist temples.
He discussed the physical toll, the spiritual history, and Koyasan, a remote temple town where travelers lodge with monks.
And then he seamlessly transitioned into a deep sociological comparison. A user asked about American family dynamics, specifically teenagers leaving home at 18.
He traced this back to the traditional American value of self-reliance, rooted in the settling of the frontier.
He contrasted that sharply with other global cultures in Europe, Asia, and Latin America, where it is normal for multi-generational families to live together well into adulthood.
That is highly nuanced sociological analysis, entirely conducted in English.
Yeah.
When a learner reaches this stage, curiosity replaces discipline as the engine of fluency.
If you are deeply invested in understanding Stoic philosophy or the history of Led Zeppelin, your brain becomes so desperate to decode the meaning that it subconsciously masters the syntax.
Now, in the spirit of exploring different infrastructures, there is a specific logistical segment of the Q&A regarding where this 3-month challenge is actually hosted that we should touch on.
Yes, the creator explicitly mentions that he bypasses traditional mainstream social media like Facebook or Twitter. Instead, he hosts the challenge on gab.com.
Now, we need to be clear here. We are simply summarizing his explicit reasons for this without taking any sides or endorsing these views.
Exactly. We are just imparting his rationale. He stated his belief that Gab operates on principles of absolute free speech, claiming they do not shadow ban users or force creators to pay for visibility.
He emphasized that it's open source and decentralized, allowing programmers to verify there are no hidden tracking mechanisms.
Furthermore, he offered a stark critique of mainstream search engines, stating his view that Google's algorithm has become corrupted. He claimed they deliberately suppress results regarding natural health alternatives like for diabetes or cancer to favor the pharmaceutical industry.
And as a result of these views, he instructs his community to use alternative search engines, like DuckDuckGo. Again, we are impartially reporting his stance on tech algorithms here.
Right. But looking at this purely through the lens of the methodology, it reveals a fascinating level of intentionality. He is applying the exact same philosophy to his digital environment that he applies to language acquisition.
He is rejecting the default tools he has been handed, whether that is an ESL textbook or a standard Silicon Valley search engine. It reinforces the central theme of self-reliance.
We have covered immense ground today, from the failure of the diagnostic X-ray machine to the neuroscience of adult learning. But I want to distill this down for the listener who desperately just wants to walk into a job interview next month or travel to London next year and speak without panic.
What is the ultimate directive for them?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
The directive is to completely abandon the classroom mentality. Recognize that fluency is not an academic subject. It is a biological adaptation.
You do not need a pristine textbook or a teacher correcting your verb tenses.
You need an audiobook that challenges your perspective. You need to leverage the double dip strategy with subtitles. You need the psychological discipline to use a Pomodoro timer.
And above all, you need the sheer willingness to log your minutes, focusing purely on the daily input and trusting the biology of your brain.
We have mapped out a complete paradigm shift today. Dismantling outcome-based tracking, gamifying input, weaponizing the double dip hack, and using curiosity as fuel.
As we conclude, I want to invite you, the listener, to apply the architecture of this methodology to a much broader horizon. Think about the single most intimidating complex goal looming in your life right now.
Perhaps it has nothing to do with learning English. Maybe it is a massive pivot in your career, a fitness milestone, or a creative project you have been paralyzed by.
What would fundamentally change in your life if, starting tomorrow, for the next 90 days, you completely divorced yourself from the final outcome?
What if you threw away the scale, stopped obsessing over the finish line, and demanded of yourself only one thing: to relentlessly measure the minutes of focused input you put in each day?
That is the question that changes everything, because the moment you stop staring at that broken X-ray machine, waiting for a clear picture of success to magically appear, and you just commit to the daily input, that is the exact moment the murky waters of your potential finally begin to clear. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep logging those minutes, relentlessly follow your curiosity, and we will see you next time.